So I'm going to continue reading from the book of Belonging. And right before we get to chapter 3, there's just a little extra something called God's dream. And this is right after Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden because they were having trouble trusting God. God was right, of course. Eve and Adam had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Each person born into the wide and wild world had to make choices. Is God trustworthy? Do I trust God's names for me? Sometimes they trusted God's names and lived as people safe in their belonging, in their belovedness, in their delightfulness. And sometimes they made wise choices. They were gracious and patient. They cared for the earth and for one another. There was love and life and flourishing. As you can imagine, those times looked a lot like God's dream. But that wasn't always the case. Sometimes they trusted untrue names, believing they were unlovable, alone, bad. Sometimes they acted cruelly and competitively, fighting for their belonging. They acted scared and ashamed, trying to earn love or put on a show to make others like them. Like camels who grew weary lying down beside the path they should travel. Like an arrow that misses its target. Like a tree that grows crooked in a harsh and rocky habitat. Like a traveler who wanders off the path. God's people sinned. They made mistakes. But no matter what they did, God knew their true names. No matter what they did, God's dream never changed. I belong with you, and you belong with me. Nothing can stop my love. I will love you when you turn away from me. I will love you when you hurt one another. I will love you when you harm the earth. I will love you when you believe untrue names for yourself. I will love you when you believe untrue names for me. And I will love you when you forget me. This was important because we often forget, don't we? But God never does. So chapter 3 is called A Family of Belonging, and it's based on Genesis 12 through 15. Dust and starlight, starlight and dust. Sarai, Sarah, and Abraham, had been traveling across long and lonesome stretches of land, hemmed in by the dust below and the stars above. Have you ever noticed how long walks help straighten out your thoughts? Left, right, left, right. Something about the plodding rhythm settles things into place. Abraham had been walking for so long that all his thoughts lay smooth. Smooth as the starry sky, smooth as the dusty road. God knows me, Abraham thought. He had untangled that in the first few hours of walking. God spoke to me. He remembered it clearly, like an echo in his head. God made big promises. God had asked Abraham to pack up his life and travel to a brand new land. Follow me to a new land where I will make your family grow into a nation, was God's invitation. From that new land, through your great family, I will bless the whole world. God's dream for people had not changed. They were made to belong with and be like God, to care for the earth and for one another. Abraham and Sarah were being invited to join that dream, to start a new place of belonging where everybody could learn about God and God's good names for them. So they followed God to the promised land. Sarah and Abraham had many miles to mull over God's promises, but there was one they returned to when the road felt long. A family of their own. Could it be? Abraham and Sarah were old as your great-grandparents, yet they had never been able to have children. The promise of a family kept the two of them walking through starlight and dust toward God's dream, but their hearts held questions. As time went by and Abraham's family stayed small, his trust began to tremble, but God was still with them. Reliable, merciful, and always kind. Don't be afraid, Abraham, God soothed. You're protected and you're never alone. I will bless you. But when? How? Abraham pleaded, his hope now a mere whisper. We've been following you for so long, yet we don't have children. He stood under the night sky, feeling very small and forgotten. Look up, came the voice of God, fresh and familiar as the wind. See if you can count the stars from here to the horizon. That's how big your family will be. Abraham's head tipped back, and his eyes grew round with wonder. He could count all night and still never finish. This is how many family members God is promising? How can this be? How can it not be? The God who made the stars, named the night, and called the whole earth good was the same God who made Sarah's womb, watching over its emptiness and ache. Look down, God said next. Abraham watched the dust dance and settle in the cool night air. Your family will be like the dust of the earth, impossible to count. Like his ancestors before him, stretching back for generations, Abraham was being asked by God to trust. But is God trustworthy? That was the age-old question. As Abraham stood, bathed in starlight and dust, he considered his journey with God to this new place. His travels with Sarah had been long and their mistakes many, but God had always been with them. When they stumbled, God had scooped them up. When they failed, God had been faithful. When they were in danger, God had delivered them. Okay, Abraham finally replied as the crags and folds of his weather-worn face rose up into a smile. Throwing his hands up in a gesture both exhausted and amused, he sighed and said, I trust you. Abraham's circumstances shifted like dust, and his hopes flickered in and out of the stars. But God was a solid place to belong. Abraham rested in that belonging and trusted in God's dream. It was exactly right, exactly good, exactly as it should be. And that is the end of this chapter.